are going to be preoccupied with briefing this morning. First off, though, as always, we have an update on some of the decisions coming out of Cabinet, and for that I'm going to turn things over now to Minister Paul.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our briefing. We want to welcome our viewers on the PBCJ and those joining us on the World Wide Web. A Government of Jamaica communications policy has been approved by the Cabinet. The first of its kind, the policy outlines a comprehensive framework for an effective government communication environment and the promotion of effective government communication and citizen engagement. The policy, which must be adhered to by all ministries, agencies, and departments, is aimed at ensuring timely, consistent, and accurate dissemination of official information to the public and foster a climate of meaningful engagement with citizens. The policy articulates 9 pillars of government communication responsibilities, including providing timely, accurate, and clear information, ensuring that government institutions are appropriately identified, visible, accessible, and accountable to the people, ensuring more cooperation among ministries, departments, and agencies, and leveraging social media. Included in the policy also are clear roles and responsibilities of ministers, government communicators, and other Government of Jamaica officials in the communication of government information. The development of the Government of Jamaica communication policy is based on the premise that a modern, well-organized, and transparent system of government communication is necessary to satisfy the diverse information needs of our citizens. Following Cabinet's consideration and approval of the Sexual Harassment Act 2015, it was tabled in the House of Representatives yesterday. The Act provides a legislative framework for addressing the issue of sexual harassment in Jamaica. Specifically, it outlines sexual harassment in the workplace, institutions, and accommodations, and actions which can be taken by men and women against those whom such offenses are committed. The Jamaican legislation has been modeled on the CARICOM Model Bill on sexual harassment, taking into account local cultural norms. Importantly, too, under the Act, victims of sexual harassment will be able to seek redress in the resident magistrate's court or at a special division of the Industrial Disputes Tribunal, which will be established for this purpose. Following debate and passage in the lower house, the Act will come before the Senate, and that debate and passage in the lower house has not yet happened. Cabinet has approved the appointment of Ambassador the Honorable Douglas Saunders as Deputy Chairman of the Board of the Petro-Carib Development Fund. At the time of the appointment of the Petro-Carib Board in February of this year, no Deputy Chairman was named. The appointment of Ambassador Saunders satisfies the requirement to have a Deputy Chairman to exercise the functions of the Chairman in the absence of or inability of the Chairman. The Petro-Carib Board has a 3-year term to February 2018. Cabinet has approved the award of a contract for the construction of the Papine-Mona Sewage Project Phase 1. The contract has been awarded to Surrey Paving and Aggregates Company Limited. It is in the amount of $51,342,000. The project forms part of the National Water Commission's continuing development of sewage treatment facilities serving the Papine-Mona area. This project will, among other things, involve the connection of UTEC to the Mona Road sewer. Under this phase of the project, some 1.5 kilometers of PVC trunk sewers and sewer manholes from UTEC's southwestern boundary to the existing manhole at the intersection with Mona Road will be constructed. The work is to commence this month and will last for 10 months. The contract is being financed from the National Water Commission's capital budget and the University of Technology. Cabinet has approved a contract valued at $47,972,000 to carry out road rehabilitation work on the Roadhouse to White House Parish Council Road in St. Catherine. The contract has been awarded to Microsurfacing Limited. The roadway to be rehabilitated is approximately 7 kilometers and serves the people in the communities of Pleasant Farm, Natty Farm, White House, and McGraw, and it is also used by trucks transporting bauxite to and from Windalco. It is in need of urgent repairs and poses a danger to both motorists and pedestrians. Funding for this project will come from the Road Maintenance Fund, and the work will commence this month and will last for 4 months. Children's advocate Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison yesterday presented to Parliament a special report highlighting serious breaches of children's rights at the Child Development Agency's Sunshine Child Care Facility. In a swift response, Minister Hanna, under whose ministry the CDA falls, told Parliament that disciplinary hearings are to be held against those CDA officers who acted inappropriately and breached the rights of children. Minister Hanna and the children's advocate, Mrs. Harrison, are here to address the report and answer your questions. And also, Cabinet received an update on the Ministry of Health's preparation regarding the Zika virus. Cabinet was told that there is no confirmed case of ZIKV in Jamaica. 1,000 ZIKV inspectors are to be trained and deployed across the island, and the Ministry of Health is setting up its fogging program across the island and has also started public education programs encouraging residents to get rid of breeding sites for the Aedes aegypti mosquitoes around their homes. And we have with us this morning Dr. Copeland, and she will also answer your questions. And I am going to turn first to Minister Hanna for her to say a few words, and then we will turn to the children's advocate for a few words from her, not long, and then we will open the floor to your questions. Minister.
Thank you, Minister Faulkner. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Minister.
No, man. Good morning, everybody. Season's greetings, and I hope that at some point you get to get some rest from what has been a very, very interesting year. Yesterday, the Children's Advocate tabled a report outlining some significant breaches that took place in the removal of some 34 children from a private place of safety, the Sunshine Care Child Facility. I received the report in my office on November 23rd, and when I received the report, having thoroughly read the report, I found myself in a position that was not only concerned, significantly concerned, but I found what I was reading outrageous on the part of a few officers within the CDA who clearly acted inappropriately. I immediately called Mrs. Gordon Harrison and we met. I told her that I was in support of her recommendations. I also felt compelled to call in Miss Vivian Morgan, who was the manager of the home and who has been in the child protection sector for over 30 years, and apologize to her for the behavior of a few of the officers in the CDA, and committed to her that we would not only visit her new premises, a team from the Ministry of Youth and Culture, but we would also seek to finalize or have the CDA finalize her licensing agreement so that the children who were in her care could, if at all possible, return to her in time for her Christmas celebrations, which they're accustomed to. Further to that, I met with the CEO, along with other representatives from the ministry, Mrs. Rosalie Gage-Gray, and we gave her specific instructions to now make sure that the framework agreements that could set up an independent panel for disciplinary hearings to hear the statements of those officers and, if necessary, take the necessary sanctions. In addition to that, we also followed up and implemented a task force of 3 persons because I felt that something is clearly wrong with the reporting mechanisms within the CDA for officers to not only give wrong information from March about the circumstances involved in closing down a home or removing children, quote unquote, but also for you to be able to breach the protocols in such a significant way that something has clearly gone awry. And so a task force, an independent task force from the ministry, chaired by Mrs. Sharon Lake, former chairman of the Women's Leadership Initiative, and a foster parent herself, and somebody who understands management. Along with her is Bishop Dr. Patricia Holness, who used to be the head of the RGD, and Miss Melissa Carr, who is an executive in one of the premier firms in this country. And they're to report to us by the end of February so that we can take the necessary actions. And then finally, I have sent off the report to the PSC, Public Services Commission, and also the Attorney General for advice on any further action. Just to say that, yes, we acted on this report immediately, and I want to not only commend Ms. Vivian Morgan, but to say to the country that our systems in terms of oversight do work, and that the Children's Advocate, when we took a decision to wait on the report because we were not getting the kind of information flow, I want to say to her that I appreciate her initiatives for making sure that we had this report. There's a lot of work to be done, but also just to conclude my brief remarks by saying to you all that it is individuals that form organizations, and we have the policies, but in the end it is individuals who have to implement them. And it is really unfortunate that the actions of a few individuals in an organization has really brought us to this point. And it really ran contrary to the spirit and intent of the CCPA, the Child Care and Protection Act, and it ran contrary to this administration's view and actions on how we should treat with all our children, because we believe that all children in the country should be treated as their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Hannah. Mrs. Gordon-Harrison.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. The particular circumstances which led to the Children's Advocate actually initiating an investigation arose out of a complaint from the Sunshine Child Care Facility and a particular church, Gilgal Holiness Church, with which the home is closely affiliated. As the minister has alluded to in her comments, when I received the complaint, there were sufficiently egregious allegations that motivated me to make certain inquiries of the Child Development Agency. Those responses that I got in relation to the inquiries made were not to my mind, and the assessment of the issues responded to sufficiently material responses that adequately addressed the issues raised. That led me to exercise the powers that I have as a judge of the Supreme Court to convene a hearing where evidence was held with a view to seeing what were some of the issues that fell to be determined. Now, I just want to make it very clear that this is perhaps one of the most uncomfortable functions that the Children's Advocate has, because within the institutional framework of the government of Jamaica, you have different state agencies that are charged with various responsibilities within the child protection sector. The difference, however, is that mine is the distinct role to hold others accountable where the need so arises. And so while we at the Office of the Children's Advocate are a part of the child protection sector, we take our responsibility very seriously in that insofar as we will work with others, we will have to part company if it is that there are any perceived breaches as arose in this particular case. In summary, some of the breaches in the duty of care that we found spoke to a fundamental breach of the best interest principle. For instance, wards were removed without the necessary files accompanying them at the time of removal. So of course you can understand that that would have breached the continuity in care that children ought to benefit from when they're being moved to a new facility. There was also the fundamental breach as articulated in the Child Care and Protection Act that when you are seeking to deal with children, the least disruptive course ought to be employed. So our issue was not that the CDA seemed to have been proactive in trying to relocate these children because of the notice to quit, but it is more the manner in which they sought to execute the particular removal of these children. The other thing that I would wish to highlight in my brief comments is that I think as a country, we must all recognize that the protection of children's rights and the advocacy for their best interests supersede personalities and institutions. We need to recognize that we cannot always continue to be a part of the establishment when there is clear basis on which to break rank. And as the minister has said, this is one of the functions of oversight entities. And I really hope that going forward from this, we can all see the importance with which we take the protection of children's rights. It's not just against private individuals, but when state players do things that do not accord with those best interests, we are prepared to stand for the children of Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now open the floor to your questions. Minister Hannah has somewhere to go to, so we're going to ask that if you have questions for her, we take those questions first. So we open the floor.
Good morning, Althea Saunders from the Jamaica Observer. Minister, you mentioned finalizing the licensing arrangement for Ms. Morgan. What is the current status of that arrangement?
Well, the current status is she actually applied for a license because at the time she had a place of safety. And now that those children were removed, she got a new premises. And she now wants to change her facility to a children's home, which is very different to a place of safety. And so I've instructed the CDA to review the situation and to make sure, based on the visits we made, and they are to make visits as well, that the lady, if at all possible, and whatever it takes to make sure that she gets her license. Because I truly believe that Mrs. Morgan is somebody that we need to keep in the child protection sector. She is someone who has devoted over 30 years. This is not somebody new. This is not somebody who we had not had familiar experiences with. And the children loved her. There was nothing bad that these children had to say about this lady. And she loves children. And so whatever it takes to try and get her, and there are some simple things. I think the place that she now has needs some infrastructural work, minor. She still has all her furniture. And we have committed at the ministry, and we're pushing the CDA to make sure she gets her license.
Just a follow-up, the investigation was triggered by a complaint from the manager of the home. What is the protocol that you have in place when children are being removed? Is the minister or the children's advocate supposed to be informed at some point? At what point are you supposed to be informed?
Very good question. And it's going to take me a little while to answer it because I need to give you the details. There is a protocol. The short answer, yes. There is a protocol that speaks to not only providing the children with counseling, to have the removal as disruption-free as possible, quote unquote, to make sure you go in and brief the children before, to make sure that their education is not disrupted, to make sure that there's really no fallout between the moving of a child from one physical space to another. And the guidelines are there. So yes, the minister must be informed. And I was informed. I was informed not only when the move was to take place, but here is where the rubber hits the road. And not only did I get wrong information, but I believe the children's advocate also got wrong information, which is in her report. I was informed that the lady had got an eviction notice and her request for an extension was denied. And so therefore, the CDA felt that it was necessary to go in and remove the children on the basis that they did not want the children to be out on the street. There were two issues with that particular correspondence that I received in writing. And when I checked back with the information, because I received a letter on March 6th from the same Gilgal Holiness Christian Church. And I immediately went to my Children's Affairs Division. I received it on March 6th. And I remember walking around to my Children's Affairs Division and said, look, get the information because something doesn't seem right. The manner in which these children were removed, something is not right. We got back information on March 25th, again, saying that the lady got an eviction notice and that the extension for her was denied by the court, that she went to court on February 16. Got that back in writing. By that time, the children's advocate had started her investigation, and we took a decision at the ministry to wait on those independent findings because something really wasn't adding up. What has happened and what the report confirms is that, one, the lady didn't get an eviction notice. She got a notice to quit, and it was consensual. She didn't go to court on February 16, as was communicated. She went to court on February 24th, and it was the same day that they were removing the children. And she asked for them to stop removing the children because she got an extension, and nobody heeded her. The officers on the ground said they could not stop. And that's what this report has confirmed. So what I said in my statement yesterday to Parliament is that the report confirms that from the beginning, there was fundamental inaccuracies in terms of the information that was provided. But yes, there are protocols that are established and guidelines when you're going in to remove children from one home to another.
If I might, Minister, just to clarify one aspect of the question that you raised. The children's advocate would not be routinely informed if it is that children are to be removed, because the Children's Advocate's Office operates outside of the ambit of the Ministry of Youth and Culture and outside of the ambit in terms of the operational day-to-day functionalities of homes. So that really is an administrative decision for the Child Development Agency to take. Where the Children's Advocate got brought in is because there was some issue that was taken with the quality of care that was being exhibited by the CDA in the particular circumstances. So in the conduct of my investigations, of course, that was one issue that I was concerned with, and the relevant questions were asked as to how that particular aspect unfolded.
Morning, my name is Javon Minton with Nationwide Radio. I just want to ask, what sort of training process do aspirants undergo before they are confirmed as officers? And secondly, how often are officers evaluated to find out if they're still in a position to continue on as child care officers?
Good question. Our officers have to be trained and routinely trained to be in that particular circumstance. And that training is ongoing throughout the year. I want to just say, however, that it's one thing to be trained, but after a while, I think that some people get burnt out. And so one of the things that I've asked the task force, and I'm sure they'll come back with, is how do you make sure that you have fresh eyes all the time and you're able to use your emotional intelligence? So for instance, if that lady came back with her extension to May 5th on that February 24th day, when Mrs. Morgan came back from the court, why couldn't someone have taken the decision to say, okay, there's really no urgency to move these children at this point? Why be so hard and fast about it? Why be so, you have a job to do, so you must get it done? And that is where I think you have a difference between the training and the emotional intelligence and perhaps the burnout. Because I'll tell you that the officers do get burnt out from time to time, but that there is regular and routine training. There's another recommendation in the report coming from the OCA that my permanent secretary and my Children's Affairs Division and the rest of us are looking at the ministry. Because she says that, look, the CDA needs to do what the CDA's terms of reference is and not spread itself so thin. So we need to find out what are some of those things that she is referring to and really sit back down with her to identify some of the other gaps that she believes is in the system. Because while the CDA falls under me and they report to me, I don't get into the day-to-day running of the CDA. And I want to make that very, very clear. Because oftentimes I think there is a disconnect between somehow sometimes what the public believes, that the minister is in there running the organization. I don't run the organization. There's a CEO and there is staff, and it's an executive agency. But what I can tell you is that when things like this that are so outrageous happens, the automatic facilities of the ministry kicks in to make sure that these situations never repeat itself, or hopefully they don't.
I want some specifics on the evaluation aspect of the officers. Because in your statement yesterday, you said that the officer, I think it's a guy, male.
No, I didn't make that,
No.
I didn't call any names in my statement. You were probably reading the report.
Perhaps. But you said specifically that the person said that they shouldn't get too attached to the children. So what I'm trying to find out is if there are any reports, appraisals on his conduct that could sort of give an insight
Devon,
into his conduct in the CDA to see if he was evaluated.
Each person has to be evaluated.
Yeah, give me some
in-
specifics
right?
on that.
I can't give you the specifics on this until the hearing takes place, and those hearings take place, and they provide the statements, also using the report. Because what typically happens in the system is that each officer has to be evaluated. There is something that kicks in and triggers if a complaint is made, etc. Perhaps in hindsight, what the CEO could have done, and I'm not making any aspersions on anybody's role as a manager in the place, is that if they also got, or if the person in charge of the division of officers got a complaint, it should have triggered an investigation immediately. You see what I'm saying? And it should have been an evaluation that was ongoing from then. But what we did was cause all of the frameworks within the agency, they will have to be seriously evaluated, and that there will be a disciplinary hearing. And depending on what comes out of that, then the recommendations will be made.
And Javon, I think it is important that this individual has not gone through the disciplinary
Yes.
process. We
So
shouldn't
let's
be
not-
All right,
discussing
let's forget
it. We
about the
need to
individual
respect
in
that
question.
process.
What I'm trying to find
Yes.
out is the specific framework that's in place to evaluate officers on a perhaps monthly, quarterly, or biannual basis or something like that. What's in place to evaluate their psychological position to see if they're still fit to be in the agencies? Because as
So
you
it's
said, it
one
was
thing-
insensitive.
All right, so the difference between whether their checklists were checked in terms of whether they're doing their jobs, or their psychological assessment? Well, if you would allow me to get back to you with a question on the psychological assessment, I would appreciate it. Because here's what has happened. You have, and I'm not a lawyer, Mrs. Gordon Harrison is, but based on your line of questioning, I don't want to answer on somebody's psychological assessment.
No, I'm not trying to find out their psychological assessment. I'm trying to find out
Yes.
the framework that's in place.
There
to
is a
evaluate
framework, and I've
officers.
said yes.
There is a framework.
Yes, there is a framework.
Okay, sorry for that. How often are they evaluated?
Annually.
Annually?
All right, Javon, we're going to move to somebody else. If we have the time, we'll come back around to you. Please.
Promise.
But I want, okay.
Edmund.
Edmund Campbell, Cleaner Company. Minister Hannah, from all indications, it appears to me that the CDA officers lied in their report. You pointed out that they told you that there was no extension granted to Ms. Morgan when she approached the court for an extension. I'd just like to know, when did you know or confirm that the CDA officers lied to you? And
I confirmed at the same time that I believe the advocate confirmed it, was when she was when I received the report in November this year.
okay, so
And
nobody.
that's what I said in the statement, that the
Right,
report confirms that I was also misled.
And they also misled the manager or the head of the CDA in
I-
their report.
I can't speak to that because the report I received regarding when the lady would or would not have gotten an extension was from the CEO, Mrs. Rosalie Gage-Gray.
Yeah, because what I was trying to figure out, seeing that Ms. Morgan had gotten an well, she found another facility, I was wondering, why is it that attempts were not made to take the children to this new facility, seeing that they were
No, she didn't get the new
uncomfortable?
facility then.
She got an extension.
She got an extension to stay at the current facility that they were being moved out of.
Okay.
Because she had leased the facility for 3 years, and the persons overseas essentially sold the property. And so it wasn't as if the lady was doing anything untoward, not
Just had the property was sold.
just that the property was sold. And she went to court in November of last year, and it was consensual that she would quit possession of the property. And that was on February 15. She went back to court on February 24th, and it was a consensual extension again. But if you read the report, it says that that was the same day the CDA was moving out the children. There was really no urgency to move them.
All right, just another issue I want to raise with you. On the question of one of the wards that reported to Mrs. Gordon Harrison in her interview, she raised some serious concerns about the conditions. I've not written about it, but I've
If you're
clearly
going to call it,
homestead,
don't,
place of
don't,
safety.
don't call the
No,
name of the
I
home,
mentioned
yes,
it.
because you're going to stigmatize the home.
Okay, all right. But I want to find out, we've heard of these issues in the past. It's not the first time we're hearing of similar issues along these lines. What is being done in terms of oversight and monitoring to deal with these kinds of issues that arise from time to time in children's homes?
Edmund, and I'm glad you keep talking about the guidelines and the protocols. Those things are in place. All of them are in place. And when I saw that particular section of the report, I acted, and I got a report from the CEO that some of the things were addressed already up at that particular home. There are some other things that have concerned me as well that I have heard, but I also want to say to you that some of those things about that particular home and in the child protection sector are not new. Because what you have to realize is that mothers and fathers, once they find out either their daughter or son is of a particular proclivity, they put them out of the home. And as children, we can't allow them to be on the street. So we have another conversation that has to be had. And one of the other things that we have sat down as a ministry to discuss is how do we now address what seems to be something serious, but with us, in terms of children, high school children, who are demonstrating sexual behaviors that are not accepted in a Christian society, and how do we now deal with that in the child protection sector? It is a conversation that, and some serious meetings that we've been holding as policymakers in the Ministry of Youth and Culture. And I would also be guided by the Children's Advocate in this particular instance, because it is something we're going to have to pay some serious attention to. But as I said, I don't want to call the name of the home because I don't want to stigmatize the home.
Andrew, see you right at the back there.
Yes, good morning. I don't know if this is better directed to the Children's Advocate, but I noticed that there is agreement that...
Speak into the mic, please.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that there is agreement that there were clear breaches, there was unprofessional conduct, and the conduct was callous and uncaring. In light of that, I don't know if you could highlight for me why there still needs to be some kind of a further hearing with respect to, some disciplinary action. And I ask the question against the background that the public is, outraged about this. And, persons are saying they don't want this to be another 9-day wonder. So can you just highlight for me why there still needs to be this kind of a process so that effective action can be taken?
Certainly. The Children's Advocate does not operate within the confines of any particular institution. And so in this particular case, as in others, if it is that there is some evidence to suggest that disciplinary proceedings need to be taken, I have no choice but to refer that to the relevant entity to take those disciplinary proceedings. Now, within the CDA, which is an executive agency, there are procedures that govern how these proceedings ought to go. And so I cannot delve into a style where I'm dictating what should happen now, But all I can say is this is what I've found, and I'm recommending that these proceedings be pursued. And so that has to take place in terms of due process to the individuals who may be involved.
And you must remember that within the public service, they have clear guidelines as to what the disciplinary process is. So those have to be followed. All right, any person who has not had a chance yet to ask a question? All right, we're just gonna go back around the room. Alfia, you had a question?
All right, Minister Hannah, you now know that your office was lied to, basically. Is there, I know there's a services commission and that, there's a process that must be followed, but is there any kind of immediate penalty for something like that? Is the officer or the officers still on the job? What is the current situation in terms of their employment?
Althea, there has to be due process even before you can separate someone from a position. You have to collect statements. You have to ensure that natural justice is allowed. So perhaps one could hypothetically say the person should be fired based on what I've seen in the report. And I'm sure there are many Jamaicans out there who have seen this, who have said that. But at the end of the day, I think all of us have understood that sometimes being merciful and understanding what due process has to allow will await the findings of what their statements have to say and the hearings, so that when any decision comes down, it can be transparent across the board. You don't want to take any hard and fast decisions based on a circumstance without making sure that you can cover your bases all 360 degrees.
Are all the children back with Ms. Morgan?
No, they're at different homes, and that is why we're trying in earnest to make sure that we can get her children, if possible, with her for Christmas. They're 34 and at different ages and different places, and she is somebody that I believe will continue to take care of those children.
All right, we're gonna have a final go around the room. Javon? Remember, we have Dr. Copeland here if you have any questions on ZICV.
I do.
Or the AD's Egypti, you can ask. Ooh, boy, you have a
Baritone.
My question is to the children's advocate. I heard when you said that you don't want to dictate what happens at the CDA, but in your concluding remarks, you said that more intensive training needs to be done. Is there a model or something that you envision that can be implemented that's currently not going on at CDA?
All right. If you look at the recommendations, I've said that because of clearly the absence of emotional intelligence that seemed to have been portrayed on the day in issue, there needed to be almost a continuing kind of injection of what really we should be doing on the ground when dealing with matters such as these. Again, for me, that is a matter that would really fall squarely within the strategic and corporate planning processes of the CDA in terms of how do we ensure that our officers are always equipped? How do we ensure that the burnout isn't kicking in? How do we ensure that if we need to do a rotational kind of assignment, that is done? And so again, if you notice how I've coined it, is that I expect to see a particular training plan put forward that has all these various components. But again, it's not a dictatorial style. It is to make the recommendation where I perceive the gaps to be, and that's what this recommendation has sought to do.
Just to add to what you're saying, one of the reasons why I took the decision to wait on the OCA's investigation is because my own emotional intelligence tells me that when you're too attached to something, sometimes you're not too objective. And your listening is clouded because there are emotional tags that are attached to that particular entity or that particular person. And so you need a fresh objectivity to guide you in this instance. And I truly believe, as I said, that the best interest of children should really supersede any personal interests or rancor or any kind of situation or institution that trumps what their best welfare should be. And so I could have taken the position to say, well, let us continue to delve. But for me, the oversight body, who is the children's advocate, I would have relied on what she had to say.
And Javon, just so you know, we are now preparing for the budget year ahead, and a lot of agencies and departments would be in the middle of their strategic planning. So I think it's a good time for them to look back at the report of the Children's Advocate and probably can include some of the recommendations that she has made as they make their strategic plans for the next financial year.
Thank you.
Edmond, you had a question?
Yes, regarding the sexual offense, well, the sexual harassment bill, which was tabled in Parliament, I'm just trying to find out the level of participation in terms of the various sectors and stakeholders in putting this piece of legislation together. What we normally have is probably a joint select committee reviewing and inviting.
Well, it was tabled in Parliament yesterday in the lower house, so that would have to be a decision made in the lower house whether or not they will decide to go that route. I am not here making any recommendations. There,
what would be your recommendation?
well, I want to see it. I'm very anxious to see it passed as quickly as possible. So the quickest route to get it there, that's what I'm for.
And it's
So,
gender neutral.
but, and remember, it's gender neutral too. Thank you, Minister Hannes. So you're protected as well, so you should be happy to see it fast-tracked. Well, thank you.
Before you close, I have a question yesterday or the day before, the World Bank released a report on Jamaica, and they were saying that the government needs to do more to induce growth in the economy. And one recommendation was that they want the primary surplus target to be reduced to 6.8%, so as the government could put more money in the capital side of things. How is the government approaching that recommendation?
Well, it was recently reduced, and we're happy for that because it allows us a little bit more breathing room in the fiscal space. But just to let you know that we have been focused on growth. We actually have a subcommittee of the cabinet, which is the growth committee, and that committee includes players from the different ministries, and we're very focused on the projects that we have, getting new projects and ensuring that these projects are fast-tracked, some of the big projects that we have. And I believe just recently permission was also given for a representative of the private sector to be invited to sit, not on the committee itself, but to participate because it's a committee of the cabinet. So we're extremely focused on growth.
But the thing is, if you ask all the people involved in the policy and the economy, they say the economy is not growing more than 1%.
But we're coming through a period of adjustment. We're coming through a period of reform, and we would have expected, just a minute, we would have expected that we were not going to see massive growth in the early periods of the reform process. And now we are seeing growth, and we expect that that's going to be improved. And all the projections are that we will have more growth in the year ahead.
You said the early periods, but we have passed 10 tests already, and we haven't had the level of growth that was anticipated. What the World Bank is recommending is that a further reduction to 6.8% in the surplus target.
Yes, but that is up to the IMF. The World Bank may recommend that, but...
So what I'm trying to find out is if the government...
Well, we would always like to see a bigger fiscal space. So if the IMF agrees to that, we would be happy.
Would you use the World Bank's recommendation as a leverage to push the IMF for the reduction? You as the government in
I
this
would have
instance.
to ask I'm not the person dealing with the strategic direction in terms of the fiscal and economic policy. So what I would have to do is to ask the minister responsible, because the minister responsible and his team would have discussions with the IMF. I could not preempt what he has to say.
Cabinet didn't discuss the report?
But I think, Minister, I think you're asking two different questions, and I think you want us to try and shove an answer into the one. But here's what I will say to you, because the minister is correct, and she is correct. You have to also look at the foundations that have been created for growth, which she has said over a period of time. If you speak to any investor in this country, and particularly business people across the business landscape, there are two seminal things that have happened in Jamaica under this structural adjustment program. One is a reduction in interest rates, a significant thing that has helped businesses not only invest, have cheaper capital, readjust their mortgage payments, but also the reduction in energy. And so businesses have also saved in terms of their energy costs to be able to retool and pay persons bonuses going forward in terms of salaries. What you also have to look at is the boom in different sectors. So the construction industry is booming.
Manufacturing.
We have 2,500 hotel rooms that are being completed next year. We have another 4,000 hotel rooms that are going to be built in St. Anne, 800 in Trelawney. The BPO sector is growing. You'd have seen Yanni Epstein in The Observer this morning speaking about that. You'd have seen Berger speaking about their record profits. You'd have seen other companies like Grace speaking about it. So while you might not have a quantum leap in terms of the growth, what you're actually feeling on the ground in terms of investment and business is something completely different to what you're saying.
You know, I'm not in a position to speak extensively to
right.
growth and
But
all
we
of
can
that.
speak after.
But I think there is a perception that we can't have reform measures going on at the same time while we have more
No,
than
there
one.
is no. Where would you get that perception
But you
from?
need them,
Because the
Javon.
numbers are showing that we're moving in the right direction. Minister outlined some of the areas. Manufacturing has jumped in terms of growth. We're looking at the deficit, the gap in the trade deficit has fallen. And those are indicators that we're moving in the right direction. So,
I've heard the minister say before, right, that let us look at the interest rates as a real example. If you as a young person went in to buy, let us say, a starter house, $10 million. If you had us buying a starter house at $10 million at the interest rate that it was at 16%, you'd have been probably paying maybe $150,000 on your mortgage. The interest rates have come down to 9% now, and persons can go in, talk to their mortgage houses, refinance. You would have now had a reduction to about $75,000. That would have been a savings in your salary, and guess what? It's coming down even further. So not only do persons, young people, will have access to better credit to do a number of things, but business people who want to invest will have access to cheaper capital. So in terms of having the discussion, Javon, and looking at it, let's just not only take World Bank reports in its entirety, but let us delve into the details to see what's really happening on the ground. We would be very happy to have a discussion with you after this, but I think ZICV is something that we need to discuss.
yeah, we will ask ZICV. We take 2 questions on ZICV.
Highlight again for me, you're going to have a vector control program, and also are there areas that may be prone, to some kind of a concern than others?
Thank you for that question. Good morning. I thought I would not have gotten an opportunity to at least say good morning, but a little relief that you are keeping abreast of what's happening in terms of the country's preparedness for the event of Zika virus entering our shores. The vector control program is an ongoing program, always in each parish, looking for and destroying the mosquito larvae and knocking down the adult mosquitoes. Each parish has been mapping, so they have the spatial data in terms of the troublesome spots. We have hot spots for the breeding, where we have large bodies of water that we can't get to easily, and so on. So the focus has to be now with this heightened program on where we have those tire shops with the tires just left stacked on sidewalks. We are focusing on the markets and where persons congregate, so like the schools and churches and other places like that. For events, it's important for the health departments to know beforehand so that the fogging exercise can be done as well. But it is heavily dependent on us all participating. You'll be surprised in the little flower pots, the saucers, and anything at all that can contain water that the female Aedes aegypti is going to take the opportunity to lay her eggs. What is compounding this is that we're still in a drought, a severe drought period, despite the intermittent rains that we have been having. And the female continues to lay even without water. So once you have the rains, as we have been having, you will see a proliferation of the mosquitoes. But you know, the personal protection, the best thing we can do is to minimize our contact with the mosquito. It is not the mosquito per se that has the fever. Humans get infected, and the mosquitoes bite infected humans, and this is how it's spread. So we will be fogging, and then come next week, you'll be seeing a lot of these young people, community health workers, we're calling them, who will be out helping householders, helping in the markets, and those places to search and destroy the breeding sites.
I noticed the matter of the tires and that kind of stuff and the pots and the plants, but do you have like any specific areas based on your mapping that you've done that say, yeah, so where
we have hotspots. Just before we started, somebody was saying that he's not benefiting from the fogging exercise. It has to be judicious use of the chemicals that we have. So we are targeting areas in and around your points of entry. Internationally, we are required to keep mosquito breeding there, none whatsoever. So the airports and the seaports, those are high priorities. And like I said, our markets and schools at this time, you know, workplaces where we know that we have gotten very high count. We call it Aedes index or vector index, where we know persons have been storing water, well, of a necessity because they may not have water. So we know those areas, and those are the areas that we're focusing on. Whilst we respond to persons just saying that, you know, it's a nuisance, you haven't been to our area in a while, you know, can you do some fogging as well? We have found places where persons have abandoned swimming pools, so we have a special focus on that as well.
And remember also that we have the public health authorities across the country, and they too work with the local councils, so the mayors and the councillors. So that is also one way of getting the information. Dr. Copeland, could you just give them a little idea, remind them what the Aedes aegypti looks like?
Oh, it has the stripes. It has the stripes. So when we're all complaining recently about these big black mosquitoes, those are the salt marsh mosquitoes. The Aedes is a much smaller mosquito, and it has the white stripes, so this distinguishes it from the others.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, because I see mosquitoes with white stripes and little white spots on the legs.
We have 89,
Yes,
we have 89 species, but the one that bothers us is the one we know is that is able to carry the dengue virus, the chikungunya virus, the yellow fever virus, and also the West Nile virus.
So where are the white stripes, doctor? And I'm not being, I just want to know where the white stripes are. On the body, on the legs?
Well, when you were a journalist this morning.
No, it's
on the legs, yes.
On the legs,
yes.
the stripes are.
Yes, and that is the one that you'll find in and around your homes.
Okay.
In your cupboards, under the bed.
Oh, Lord. Thank you.
In dark corners.
Thank you, Dr. Copeland, for that instructive piece on the Aedes aegypti. I'm glad that mosquitoes don't bite me. We want to thank our media for coming. They don't. We want to thank our media for coming this morning, and we want to thank our viewers on the PBCJ and those joining us on the World Wide Web. Thank you so much, and have a great day. They don't bite me.
You just don't feel it? No, man, they bite you, Sandra.